Okay, here we are again.
Hello.
So we're up to week 5 now.
Brilliant news.
We've made it halfway through.
Jesus time.
Yay.
And
Last.
we've had our hair cut. So it's
So-
double good news.
There we go. Much more appealing for the viewer now. Okay, so let's just do a quick recap. We've got a lot to get through. So started off with
Creation,
Creation,
the fall, Israel.
Jesus.
Jesus time.
Okay, so this was where we've got to, that God in his grace gave us a great creation, put mankind as his image, as his representative to go and look after the earth, and mankind actually rebelled and decided we want to do our own thing, go our own way, and that led to all sorts of dreadful consequences. But God still wouldn't give up on his creation and spoke to a family and said that through this family I'm going to bring a blessing to redeem the world. And that was the people of Israel, who were the people of promise, but also the people of the curse. So although they had wonderful intentions, God gave them such grace and a very high calling, actually they still ended up with acting the way that all humanity acts, actually. They just couldn't carry it.
Can't get it together.
No. So
We needed something else.
we did, and thank God for Jesus. So let's just concentrate. We've already talked about this, but I just want to bring it back to your minds that there were, if you like, 3 strands of expectation in the time of Jesus. Okay, there'd been this story had been progressing. They'd come out from the exile. They'd gone back into the land, the promised land, and they'd been rebuilding the temple, rebuilding the walls, looking forward to this time of God restoring them. Okay, and there were 3 strands that actually during this time that they're waiting kind of got stronger and stronger. Okay, the 3 strands were this. Number 1, Messiah. Okay, there's the one that most people would know about. It was linked to King David. It was this prophecy that one day, through David's line, a king would arise that would bring justice, would release the people of Israel from their oppression, and there would be, this flourishing of Israel to be who they were meant to be in the world. And so this Messiah figure was what they were waiting for. Okay, and not only just for Israel, but actually this king that would arise would actually be in some way the king of the whole world, that all the nations would come and surrender to this king. So that was the big one, Messiah. Actually, there was another strand of expectation that I want to call the servant. There's particularly in the prophet Isaiah speaks a lot about this character that would come and would bear the sin of the world, bear the sins of Israel, and as in doing that would bear the sin of the whole world. And so we've got this this passage, it's well known now, Isaiah 53, of the suffering servant who takes on the sins of the world. And so there was this sense in which God is going to bring a servant. Is it the people of Israel that were suffering for the sins of the world? Was it one individual that would arise from Israel to be the servant of God and take on that sin? But there was this expectation that someone was coming. Okay, so of Messiah, we have the servant, and thirdly, we have this idea, this promise that God himself would come. Okay, so Ezekiel, the prophet, sees God, if you like, leaving, his glory leaves the temple. This is just before the Babylonians come and smash up the temple, smash up Jerusalem. And he says he sees the glory of God leaving the temple. So, which of course, how could a foreign army invade Israel, the promised land, the people of God, and come and destroy the temple? They couldn't if God was there, but God had left. That's how Ezekiel sees it. God leaves and allows them to destroy the temple. So there then start to be these promises that God himself will return. And so those were the 3 strands, the Messiah, the servant, and God himself. And those are the hopes and the expectations of the people of Israel as Jesus comes on the scene. Remember that we've got this cryptic pointer of 490 years that the prophet Daniel saw.
7 times 70.
7 times 70. Well done. Yeah, it's 490 years where they will suffer until the atonement of sin is complete.
Mm-hmm.
So they know that it's coming up. Something's happening.
They were counting down the years.
Yeah, well, they didn't know exactly when that 490 years would start, so where were they exactly? There was always debate around that. But it was some time around now, and we'd had those 4 kingdoms, remember, coming and going. It was finishing with the Roman Empire.
Mm.
So they knew it was around this time. Something was happening. Okay? Now then, so we've got this expectation. Let's just look briefly at how the New Testament gospel writers introduce Jesus, because what they do is to take all these themes that are in the hopes and the expectations of the Jewish people, and they bring them into their introductions. Each of the gospel writers, in their own way, introduce Jesus and say, this is the one. So let's have a quick look at it. I've got my Bible here, and we could spend days on this, analysing it all, but we'll just do it. Let's just do Matthew, I think. The introduction to Jesus. So Matthew starts with the genealogy of Jesus, and he says this in the first verse: a record of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. So, 2 great ancestors, David and Abraham, that we've already looked at. So he's already saying, look, this is the one that was coming ultimately from Abraham, the covenant, through to David, the son of David, the Messiah. So we've got these already. We've got these 2 main themes that are coming out, and he says this, and which is an interesting one. I don't know if you've ever seen this. Verse 17: there were 14 generations in all, from Abraham to David. Okay, Abraham to David, 14 generations. Then 14 from David to the exile in Babylon. And then 14 from the exile to the Christ. So it's interesting.
He sat and worked it out.
He counted them all out and says there are 14. So there's 3 lots of 14. Okay, now if you do your maths there, you could say 3 lots of 14 is exactly the same as 6 times 7. 6 lots of 7. Which may sound a bit strange. Bear with me. 6
and
lots.
that's important because
6 lots of 7 means that this is Jesus starting the 7 times 7th generation. It's the Jubilee generation. So remember how the Sabbath went. The Sabbath year, every 7 years was a Sabbath, and then on the 7th 7 year of Jubilee. And what he's pointing out here, I think, is to say we've got the Jubilee generations. We've got 6 times 7 generations up until Jesus. Jesus is the beginning of the 7th times 7 generations, the Jubilee generation. Okay, make of that what you will. Anyway, I think that's another way that Matthew wants to say this is an important point for understanding who Jesus is. Okay, he obviously wants you to know that it's from Abraham and from David. Okay, but there's something about the numbers as well that he wants to point out there. Okay, think about the names that Jesus is given in the book of Matthew. Okay, number 1, so it's the story of when Mary is told that she's going to have a child, and it's going to be conceived by the Holy Spirit, and you're to give him the name Jesus, Yeshua, meaning the Lord saves, because, says the angel, he will save his people from their sins. This is the servant. Okay, we've had the David, the Messiah, the King. Now we're talking about the servant.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to save his people from their sins. The next one, what's the other name that Matthew reminds us of?
I'm going to guess Emmanuel.
Yeah,
Really?
Yeah, the virgin will be with child. So
Do they all say Emmanuel? All the Gospels?
No,
Oh.
no. This is just Matthew.
Lucky guess.
And will give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. So we've got the Messiah, we've got the servant, and we've got God returning.
Okay.
Just in this first few verses, we start to see, and all the gospel writers will do this in their own way. We'll start to shape their introductions about Jesus to say it's around these three things. It's the King coming, the new King, the Messiah. Remember, Matthew goes on to talk about the Magi coming from the east,
Mm-hmm.
and how they come recognising this one who is born King of the Jews, and they've come to worship him. In other words, all the different nations that will come, this promising of Messiah, that all the nations will come to him, and he's recording that for the people to see. Oh, this is the one. That it's like he's saying, this is to stamp the authority on what I'm saying. Remember, this has happened. These are the reasons why we think he's the real one. The servant, the Messiah, God himself. So that's the book of Matthew. You can do the same with the book of Mark, Luke and John, just to see how they do it. And the big thing is this, that each of these gospel writers are writing in their own way to say, this is the good news that Jesus brings. He is the fulfillment of this story that we've been looking at right the way back from Genesis all the way through. Each of the gospel writers in their own way says, this Jesus, he is the fulfillment of everything that we've been waiting for and hoping for. And they do it in different ways, but all of them do it saying the same things essentially. They talk about him as fulfilling the story of being the new Adam, where the old Adam failed. The new Adam, Jesus, succeeds. Where he's the new Isaac, the child of promise. So not just Abraham's seed, but the child of promise. They want to help us to understand this is the fulfillment of that. The new Moses, the new lawgiver, the one that would come and shape how the people of God would look. This is now Jesus, the new David, the new king that's coming. All these things are the fulfillment of what we've been reading about so far. And the gospel writers want you to know that, as in their different ways, as they're retelling the stories, introducing Jesus, telling us what he's done, what he said. They're not just giving us random bits of information about Jesus. Oh, I remember the time he did this. Oh, did he say that? Yeah, I think he said that. And they just jot it down. That's how sometimes we read the Gospels. Whereas actually they're putting forward a case which their own people were going to read. Often it was the Jews or the people of that time that were reading these books that they wrote with the reason that they wanted to understand who is this character, Jesus. And the gospel writers are writing deliberately to say he is the fulfillment of this long story that's been winding its way round, that we never quite understood, but now we've seen it, the fulfillment of it, and this is what it looks like. Okay?
Yep.
So, with all that in mind, we're going to set the discussion question. I'm going to go to the first chapter of Mark, where Mark talks about Jesus. This is verse 14. He says that Jesus went out proclaiming the good news of God, or the gospel of God. And it gives you a hint what Jesus talked about. But I want to just have this as the discussion question. What do you think Mark means? What was in his mind when he talks about the gospel? Okay?
Mm-hmm.
We'll have a little chat about that. What does Mark mean when he talks about the gospel? And Jesus talked about the gospel in the first chapter of Mark. Okay, we'll talk again tomorrow. Bye now.
Bye.